Millennials have been at the forefront of so many cultural shifts, breaking stigmas around mental health, demanding work-life balance, questioning outdated norms, and choosing purpose over perfection. And now they're beginning to face one of the most misunderstood transitions of womanhood, perimenopause. But this generation isn't about to quietly suffer through hot flashes and hormone swings. They're asking questions, they want knowledge, and they're rewriting the story their mothers never got to tell. Welcome to Pleasure in the Pause, a podcast dedicated to empowering women to connect to their bodies, pleasure, and power in perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. I am your host, Gabriella Espinosa, women's health and sexual wellness coach, and it is my pleasure to be here with you today. As a Gen Xer who has walked the path of perimenopause and emerged on the other side of menopause feeling more grounded and more connected to my power than ever, I feel passionate about lighting the way for the women coming up behind us because they deserve more support, more knowledge, and yes, more pleasure. That's why I'm so excited to welcome today's guest, Lauren Tetenbaum, also known as the counselor. Lauren is a licensed social worker, writer, and former lawyer who now dedicates her work to supporting women through big life transitions, especially millennial women navigating motherhood, identity, and now perimenopause. Lauren's upcoming book, Millennial Menopause, Preparing for Perimenopause, Menopause, and Life's Next Period, is due out in July 2025. And let me tell you, it's the warm, smart, judgment-free guide every millennial woman needs on her nightstand. I first met Lauren at the Let's Talk Menopause in New York City, and I was immediately drawn to Lauren's curiosity, compassion, and deep desire to make these conversations more accessible and empowering for a new generation of women. In today's conversation, we explore why so many millennials feel caught off guard by perimenopause, how this generation is uniquely positioned to shift the narrative, what Lauren has learned through her practice and her writing, and how we can support women to move through this transition with curiosity, confidence, and yes, humor. Whether you're a millennial navigating your first signs of hormonal change or a fellow Gen Xer like me who wants to pass the torch with wisdom and grace, this episode is a call to reclaim power in a stage of life that's been too long ignored. Join me in welcoming Lauren to Pleasure in the Pause. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. We met at the Let's Talk Menopause event in New York City last year, and I really loved your energy, your enthusiasm around educating and empowering younger women about menopause. You started your career out as a lawyer and then transitioned to becoming a therapist focusing on mental health and on life transitions impacting women in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, what we call millennials. How did menopause become an issue of interest for you?
So I love your energy too, and I'm honored that you said that about me. It's such a pleasure to connect with you and to be here. Menopause for me came about because I realized that I knew nothing about it. And
Mm.
I met Anne Fullenwider, who is the co-founder of Alloy, at a networking event. And honestly, I was blown away by how little I knew about menopause, even though I'm super passionate and always have been about women's reproductive health, their life stages. And I realized that I wanted to learn more and I wanted to share that with my peers, my clients, my friends, my entire generation.
Mm. So that just sparked that conversation with Anne. What specifically about that conversation was it that, like, oh my gosh, I need to know this. My whole generation needs to know this.
The fact that she was speaking about self-advocacy and about women who had their agency basically stripped away from them after the WHI study in
Yeah.
2002, and how hormone therapy just was off the table. And through her company Alloy and her advocacy and the women that she's collaborated with since, and all the women who you and I have gotten to know in our work in the past few years, we've been talking about it more and really pushing for more from the government, from healthcare studies, from schools that are training doctors and nurse practitioners. And we need to keep talking and pushing for change. And my mom always told me, if you don't ask, you won't get. And I believe in that. But I also realized that my generation had no idea where to even begin with asking the questions.
Yes, that self advocacy. We're all about that here on Pleasure in the Pause, advocacy in and out of the bedroom. And it all starts with empowering yourself with knowledge, which I know you are sharing. You wrote an article last year for Mama Beasts. Are you there, menopause? It's me, a millennial mom. A nod to Judy Bloom, who we all grew up with. I love that. And it struck a chord with so many millennials. You say in the article that millennials are used to openly discussing puberty, periods, and pregnancy. I also find millennials are very open to discussing sexuality, which I love. But menopause still feels a taboo territory for so many. Why do you think this generation struggles with understanding and preparing for perimenopause and menopause? And how do you think we can change the narrative and make these conversations more accessible and empowering?
I hope that we can change the conversations by having them, by starting to have them, by sharing resources like your podcast, my forthcoming book, and really just destigmatizing these issues. As a therapist, as a mom, as a woman in the world, I know very deeply how important it is to share knowledge and experiences and resources. And when you think about the fertility struggles that women go through, or perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, or the difficulties in transitioning back to work, you always hear, wow, it feels so much better to talk about this, or I wish I had known before, or I am so grateful to be in community. And that's what we need to do with menopause, though I do agree that it's still somewhat of a taboo topic. People still, even my dearest friends, when I say I've been working on menopause on a book and researching, and they wrinkle their noses and say, menopause, ew. And I think a lot of that just has to do with inherent misogyny, to be honest, and also this fear of aging, in particular of women's aging.
Yeah. When I think about the education that I received, and I'm sure you and all of us received, it was really about your worth is centered around your reproductive cycle, right? Your periods, of course, and having babies. And then everything after that, silence. And I think that silence creates that sense of taboo, that stigma, that shame. I was living in the UK for quite some time, especially when this menopause revolution started a few years ago. And they have started incorporating menopause education into high school curriculums, which I think is such a brilliant idea. I mean, just starting to, from there, right? Starting to just normalize that this is what comes next. Yes, you get periods. Yes, you can choose to have babies if you want, but there's so much more waiting for you afterwards. And this is what it's all about. So I love that you titled that article, Are You There, Menopause? It's me, a millennial mom, because yeah, why don't we make it part of that ongoing conversation? Periods,
Mhm.
production, post reproduction, menopause, right? Do
Yeah.
you see a state of the world where we incorporate menopause education into high school curriculums?
I certainly hope so. I also lived in the UK for a couple of years, and their healthcare system is quite different than the US. And of course, everything has pros and cons. But even in the way that the NHS, the government healthcare system there, is now offering financial support for hormone therapy, and just the rhetoric around menopause is something that is aspirational for us Americans.
Mhm.
So I certainly hope that we become more educated. It does start in middle school, high school, in our own homes, with our own children, with friends. And I hope that certainly continues through the top, right? We need more medical providers getting more education. It was astonishing to me to learn how little they received. And they're supposed to be the healthcare experts on this healthcare issue.
Yeah, so much to do. That's why I'm so happy that you've joined this movement. We need more voices like you. You perfectly describe perimenopause as life's next period. I love that. What do you mean by that? And how can this framing help women approach this stage with more curiosity and less fear?
Yes, thank you for that question and the compliment. I love a good pun. So the period of it all is a wink and a real reflection of the fact that this is our next phase of life. This is not an ending. In fact, women are living up to 80, up to 100. Both my grandmothers are in their mid 90s. And so women are going to be spending, if they go through spontaneous menopause at the average age of 51, they're going to be spending a third or even maybe half their lives post menopause. So we can't think of it, we shouldn't think of it as the end or all doom and gloom. Aging is a privilege, and I know it comes with a lot of ambivalence a lot of the time, but reframing our mindset to approach it, as you said, with more curiosity, more optimism, and just more self compassion and compassion for others is so key to not only surviving this phase, but thriving in it.
Yeah, that's very well said. Thank you for that. And as a result of this, you've written a book titled Millennial Menopause. Congratulations. It's due out on the bookshelves in June, I believe, but it's available for pre order now. Oh, so it's July and available for pre order now, which aims to prepare millennials for this next phase of life with humor, empowerment, and professional advice. It sounds like a must go-to guide for every millennial. What made you realize that a book like this was missing from the conversation, and how do you hope it shifts how millennials approach perimenopause and menopause?
Thank you for saying all that. I realized that there was such a gap in knowledge that someone had to fill it. And I'm one of many voices. There are so many amazing advocates and experts in this space. For me personally, I felt that the millennial generation, those born approximately 1981 to 1996, plus or minus a few years, no one was really talking to us about it yet.
Mm.
Arguably, we're young. I'm about to be 40, and we know that the average age is about 51. But we also now know that perimenopause can be several years before that last menstrual period. And that means that for those of us who were born in 1985, like I was, we are likely about to enter into perimenopause if we're not already.
Mhm.
And everything that I read in the research that I did and the conversations that I've had, so many women said, I wish I had known. I wish I had some clue because we're clueless and we shouldn't be. As you said earlier, knowledge is power. And it's my hope that this sparks conversation, it sparks self advocacy, it sparks legislative advocacy, and just really opens our world for more resources and opportunities for support.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I hear so often, and was my experience as well, was that I was caught totally off guard by it. You're in the thick of it, mothering, careers, trying to live your best life, balancing life, work, relationships, and all of a sudden you just don't feel like yourself anymore. And you just can go down rabbit holes trying to figure it out, or you can just push it away, just not listen to those whispers of your body that things are changing. And you just keep pushing and striving and not really focusing on your health. And I think the sooner we know about it, the more we can tend to those messages from our bodies. Can you give us a sneak peek into what readers can expect from millennial menopause?
Sure. So readers can expect it to feel like your best friend slash therapist talking to you one on one about what's going on, how you can prepare for that phase, whether it's regarding sex, working, parenting, talking to the men in your life about it, how to talk to healthcare providers about it, physical issues, mental health issues, and societal issues. Because a lot of what we talk about when we talk about women's health is related to the external systems and what's going on around us, whether it's local laws or medication options. And so it's important to have context in whatever you're facing and then navigate that with empowerment.
And what's one takeaway you hope every reader walks away with?
That you're not alone and that support is available.
Excellent. I love that you included conversations with our partners because that's something that's often left out. Our partners are also left in the dark, wondering what's going on. What's one way you advise women to start that conversation with their partners? How can we bring them into this journey with us?
So there's an entire chapter that is for the male in the reader's life. And I literally encourage the reader, who's presumably someone who identifies as a woman, to hand over the book to a man in their life to read that chapter. And it will probably be a lot of partners, but also brothers, friends, whomever it is, because men need to be allies in this movement to getting women the health care and support that they deserve. And men should know what's going on with the women that they care about. This is not a niche issue. This is an issue affecting half the population. And I want to think that men care about women. And so they should care about menopause.
I think they absolutely do care about women, but I think they've also been shut out of the conversation. I remember when I was talking to my husband about it, he used to remember witnessing his mother going through health struggles, which he now knows were probably menopause struggles. And he was just shooed out of the room. These are women's problems. Don't you worry. And he was a teenager and he's mature enough to understand. And I think he brought some of that into our relationship. Okay, this is your issue. This is your problem. I'm not supposed to know about it. I'm like, no, this is our issue because when you're going through perimenopause or menopause, it not only impacts you, it impacts everyone around you. You're not only going through, but the repercussions of it are far fetched, really. They are, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So it's so important. I'm so glad that you are incorporating that chapter for partners in the book. Last season, I spoke with the amazing Omishade Bernie Scott from the Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause, who emphasized the power of gathering women across generations to share stories about their changing bodies in this life stage. Do you see millennials embracing these kind of intergenerational conversations?
I do, and I'm hopeful about it. I think that we're at the beginning of that. I researched and surveyed hundreds of women for my book, mostly millennials, but also women of Gen X and the baby boomer generation, whether they're experts or friends of mine personally. And I couldn't have written the book without those women's expertise and insight. And I
Mm.
think it is incredibly powerful for women to come together and gather and just support each other. Just showing up really makes a huge difference. But certainly sharing experiences and information is pivotal to making the next generation do even better, do even more, and contribute to lasting change.
Yeah. And I think it's just sometimes knowing how to start those conversations. So if younger women are sitting at the dinner table with family members or friends from different generations, what kind of questions do you think they could ask to start meaningful conversations about menopause and midlife transitions?
So, one thing that I noticed among my peers, my generation, is that none of us talked about menopause with our mothers. So, I will say that if you have your mother in your life and a dialogue that enables you to start there. Ask your mother, what was your experience with menopause like? How old were you? Do you remember what your symptoms were? Do you remember what helped you? Would you have done anything differently if you could? What advice do you have for me? And it was so interesting that our generation didn't get those opportunities. And I think I still see that now among the women that I know of my mother's generation, because they were basically conditioned, as you mentioned, to not talk about it. It's private, it's no one's business. And certainly, yes, of course, there's an element of privacy here. And I'm not insisting that everyone tell everybody everything. But I think it is important because it normalizes the conversation about healthcare. And I also think that a large part of the reason why our mothers didn't talk about it was because their options were so limited that they were effectively forced to just suck it up and carry on. And the younger women are saying, no, I'm not going to do that. And
Mhm.
rightfully so.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I also spoke to Dr. Sharon Malone, who is a chief medical officer at My Alloy, and she said the holidays, Thanksgiving or Christmas or anytime you're gathering as a group, as a family, those are really opportune times to have conversations, maybe not necessarily about menopause, although menopause definitely should be raised, but just about healthcare, taking a health history, like starting to form your family health history tree by asking your grandmothers, your mothers, your aunties. I know when I asked my mother about menopause, she just denies it. Oh, it didn't happen. Maybe because menopause was such a taboo topic for them, or it is still for them, maybe just starting around other health issues or just more broadly taking a broader lens and not going straight for menopause sometimes also helps lead the conversation to, oh, okay, so you started experiencing this then or this at this time. And maybe you come to your own conclusions, or you could say, oh, I now know that's menopause and something we don't talk about. We didn't talk about probably in your generation, but we're talking about it now. And I guess there are so many different ways to approach those conversations delicately and as discreetly as possible because sometimes you are faced with a wall sometimes with older generations who again were never asked that question.
And you could say, come July, I read a really great book about
Yes,
menopause. What do you think about this topic?
exactly. So showing enthusiasm about your own learning and saying, I want to know what your experience around this was. Definitely. Let's dive into mental health. Many of our listeners are balancing demanding careers, raising children, and now navigating hormonal shifts. What trends are you noticing in your work when it comes to perimenopause, menopause, and mental health?
Sure. So I specialize in perinatal mental health, and that was really the bulk of my practice before learning and practicing more in the perimenopause space. And there are so many overlaps. Think about even the symptoms, whether you're having night sweats, teariness, irritability, tender breasts. Are you postpartum or pregnant, or are you perimenopausal, or are you both, perhaps? Because women are having babies later and later. And in my research, it occurred to me that these were issues that we needed to be talking about because the moms that I work with, who we have worked through some postpartum depression, perhaps prenatal anxiety, whatever it might be, and they're in a good groove and we've developed really good coping mechanisms. And suddenly they're coming to sessions and saying, I just don't feel like myself. And those of us in the menopause space know that is the warning alert that perhaps something is going on hormonally. And it's so important to look into what's going on with their cycle if they have one, but also all of the other symptoms and contexts in which they're living. In general, it's a lot of this sense of loss of who they are, who they
Mm.
were, these identity shifts that we see a lot in the perinatal period as well. But it's a new and different one that they were very unfamiliar with before our work together.
Absolutely. It is that sense of identity of who am I now as you're experiencing the shifts. I think That shift in identity is huge. And I talk to women about it all the time. It's something that I've questioned repeatedly since I moved from motherhood to perimenopause and menopause. This question of who am I? All of a sudden, you wake up one day, look at yourself in the mirror. Who am I? And I think that whilst we're well prepared for motherhood and parenting, I think we're not prepared to handle the overwhelming mental load that women carry. Again, the juggling of work, parenting, caregiving, it feels so hard, almost impossible to carve out time for ourselves, our own self care. What advice do you have for women to alleviate their mental loads and make space for themselves to really go into this reflection of who am I? How do I want to show up as a mother, as a woman, as a partner, and as a career woman? I think all of those questions get jumbled up because we have so much going on. So many pressures and demands are being placed on us.
I absolutely agree, and it's difficult. I will address sort of the first part of what you just said, which is that how can we prepare? And sometimes it feels like we can't. Sometimes we need to have the lived experience. I think that while you can read about it and talk about it, yes, to some extent, you have to live through it to really understand it. That being said, you can certainly set yourself up for success when it comes to getting the support and resources in place. I often work with women in the perinatal period who are pregnant or thinking about having a baby, and we talk about their mental health, their risk factors. We know that up to 1 in 5 women experience a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. And that if you've had anxiety or depression in the past, you're at higher risk of experiencing such symptoms in the perinatal period. So, what does that mean? That means talking to your partner about warning signs if you're experiencing a depressive episode, having people in place to come over and give you a break from caretaking with the baby to let you sleep, having a therapist, etc. So those are ways, those are tools in our toolbox and some of many that we can use to prepare. And similarly with perimenopause, which is likewise a risk period in our mental health as women, we can set ourselves up to be prepared, to be supported by knowing what to look out for and knowing where to go for help. And part of that is alleviating the mental load by not doing it all. Women are conditioned to be people pleasers, to be 110% parenting and 110% at work. And you don't have to be good at math to know that doesn't actually add up. And that's not a real figure or possible to do. And so we need to demand better policies that support us, whether it's paid leave for perinatal issues or for menopause, whether it's having a partner who's an actual partner in the home and not an intern that you need to boss around and
Mhm.
delegate tasks to. It means building a village. And all of this is true for women in every life stage. And I firmly believe that.
So these are changes that you'd like to see in how mental health care addresses the perimenopause to menopause life phase or challenges. I know that you do quite a lot of that in your own work. Can you share with us how you do that in terms of workshops and community gatherings?
Yes, absolutely. Gender equity in the home has been a passion of mine, honestly, since I was a child. I was the president of my high school's Women's Issues Club, et cetera. And in the past few years, I've been working closely with Eve Rodsky's Fair Play Institute. And I use that method with clients and at workshops. And that's a tool to help have conversations about more equitably dividing the domestic division of labor. And it's one of a few tools that I use with clients, whether they're individual women or couples, to have conversations about what feels fair. And that involves empowering the woman to have those conversations, to initiate them. It involves helping her relieve some of her anxiety around letting go of a certain task. It involves looking at her values. Is she with a partner who is listening to what she's struggling with and is willing to care? And does that align with who she wants to be as a woman, as a partner? And it's really important to recognize that we don't have to do it all at the same time. We can't do it all at the same time. And we have to be supporting each other in demanding more equity.
Mm. I think that is so, so necessary. I wish I had those tools when I was deep in the throes of motherhood. Part of the challenges is just starting those conversations. What are some conversation starters that women can use to begin those conversations with their partners of getting more help in the home or with childcare?
Yeah. So it is hard to start this conversation, especially if we've grown up in a certain environment and
Mhm.
we're used to seeing certain models of behavior. But it's never too late to make a change or to start the conversation. And I like to encourage opening the dialogue as a reflection of society. It's not that my husband's a jerk, it's that men are conditioned to have the day off work for a federal holiday and go play golf, whereas women are scrambling to take care of the children and they still have work. We're all in this bubble of conditioning, and I don't want to blame individual men. I want to assume that they just didn't realize that's how we were functioning, and to say, "Oh, of course I love my children as much as you do. Of course I want to know who their dentist is and what time they go to bed." These are not rocket science facts that mothers are inherently better at knowing or doing. It's that women get more practice at them and are expected to do things like the baby's bath or whatever it might be. And so it's all about having the dialogue about context again and about what is important to me and what is important to my partner and how can we communicate about it and keep communicating because it's a fluid conversation. It requires constant check ins. How is this working for you? What's up for you this week? Kind
Mhm.
of busy late nights at work or whatever, and really being a team.
Yeah, absolutely. Those constant check ins and just keeping that communication constantly flowing because I know that can lead when that doesn't happen, it can lead to a buildup of resentment, assumptions. And again, because if we have male partners, yes, they haven't been conditioned to do that. So they may forget. They may not.
Well, I always say you didn't marry a dummy. You presumably chose him, you respect him. Probably he's successful in his career, etcetera, and again, he cares. He cares about you, he cares about the kids. So let's figure this out together
Mm,
because it otherwise leads to resentment and, as you said, to burnout, to mental health issues, and that's not helpful for any of us.
yeah, absolutely. Another thing that comes up during this life stage or during this pressure cooker of managing kids and work and life is pleasure. So, a huge part of this podcast is about helping women reconnect with their pleasure. We know the hormonal changes can impact libido at every stage, whether it's pregnancy, postpartum, and perimenopause. What trends or struggles are you seeing among the women you work with when it comes to desire and intimacy?
So, absolutely, hormonal changes are incredibly important to the way that we function physically and mentally. And I will say that the mental load in general impacts libido, energy, desire, that emotional connection with one's partner or self or lack thereof. And going back to the conversation about even the household chores, that if you're feeling resentful towards your partner about not carrying the weight in the home, you're probably not in the mood for sex. And then everything is a cycle and exacerbates the next issue. And you feel like your marriage is rocky and maybe you engage in self blame or further resentment, et cetera, et cetera. So it is so important to really connect with who you are as a person, what your values are, what's important to you. Also, the importance of sleep, and that plays a role in mental health, in hormonal health, everything. I can't emphasize enough how important sleep is. So make sure that you're feeling physically good, rested, and that you're able to communicate with your partner about what you might need in and out of the bedroom and what you want in and out of the bedroom.
Yeah. So great. I love using the very simple format of the five love languages to understand that. What is it that you need to feel love and supported? Acts of service is one of the love language. And I can just tell you it's the biggest turn on for me to see my husband take out the garbage, do the dishes, and I can tell always when he's doing the dishes, like, very like, he's taking his time and doing the dishes, and he's like, "No, no, 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 I'll do it." I'm like, "Okay, I know where this is going."
It
Acts
works for you. That's beautiful.
Seriously. Acts of service, words of affirmation. There's so many things to really when it comes to understanding what your value system is, what is important for you to feel loved and supported, and communicating that. And our partners equally have the same needs. And so understanding what they need, because I like you said, it's a partnership. It's a relationships are reciprocal. And if each partner acts from this place of generosity, right? Not like a tit for tat, okay, you do this and I'll do that, but really this open-hearted generosity, things really work and flourish and feel good.
Yes. I will say quality time as well as a love language is so important. And I know very difficult at this phase of midlife who has quality time for themselves, their partners, but it's key. And it doesn't need to be hours and hours, date nights, this or that. It could be 20 minutes alone by yourself or with your partner or whatever it is. It's important to really prioritize that. And I will also say that just compassion from one's partner can go so far. I have a client that I've been working with for years, and she's experiencing a lot of perimenopausal. I was going to say perinatal. That's how we met. And now we're in the perimenopause phase. And she's experiencing a lot of mood disorders, symptoms, as well as sexual functioning issues. And she felt for a long time like her husband just didn't hear her and didn't understand. And we've worked on how she communicates with him and how she communicates with herself about all of these things going on. And it's been really amazing to see the difference in how she's feeling now.
Yeah, I think every guest on this podcast has stressed communication is key. So, where would you typically start if a woman is feeling stuck, overwhelmed, disconnected from her body, this feeling of I'm not feeling like myself? Are there tools or practices you recommend to help women reconnect with their sense of vitality or pleasure or joy?
Yes, there are quite a few. One of my favorites is using self compassion. And really, that's the practice of talking to yourself the way you would a friend. I
Mhm.
also like to say that women are conditioned, again, always conditioned, but women are conditioned to be their own biggest critics. And I encourage us to be our own biggest cheerleaders. And I know that's hard. And sometimes we need help to do that, right? From a therapist, a friend, a loved one, whatever it is. But I think that women deserve to be their own biggest cheerleaders. So be nicer to yourself, even if you're having a tough time. It's key to being nice to yourself. I ask my clients, what brings you joy? Much like you ask people, what brings you pleasure? And it could be really small. It could be enjoying a walk outside for 5 minutes with your dog or whatever it is. It's important to reconnect with that part of yourself and to figure out how to make space for it when you don't have enough of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that self-talk is so important. Words, language matters. Before we close, what's one piece of advice you'd offer to millennial women who are feeling apprehensive or unprepared for this next chapter? How can they step into it with confidence and curiosity?
Talk about it and ask for help. You might be experiencing mood shifts because of hormonal shifts and you're perimenopausal, or you might just be really stressed at work. But whatever it is, you deserve support, community, and self compassion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Finally, Lauren, I always like to close my conversations by asking my guests, what does pleasure mean to you?
I think of pleasure as being lighthearted and silly. I think it's really fun no matter how old you are or whatever situation you're in, to find some piece of joy and laughter and have fun in life. Sometimes my kids are screaming at me or trying to get out the door in the morning, and you can diffuse those high emotions in the situation by making a joke or putting on a silly song or dancing with your girlfriends is so key. So be silly, be lighthearted. I know it's not always easy, but laughter really makes a difference.
Oh, yes. Playfulness and just maintaining that sense of innocence is for grown-ups too. I love that. Thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. I know our listeners are going to walk away feeling informed, validated, and inspired to embrace this next stage of life with confidence and curiosity. For those who want to learn more about your work or keep up with your upcoming book, where can they find you?
Thank you so much for having me. All of my info is on my website. It's thecounselor.com, but spelled LAUR for Lauren. And you can email me, Lauren at thecounselor.com. And I am always happy to point people in the right direction and support and empower women.
And your book is
My book,
available for
yes,
pre-order,
my
right?
book is available for pre-order. It's on my website as well. It's at all major booksellers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc. It's distributed by Simon and Schuster, and it will be released July 15th, 2025.
So exciting. Thank you again, Lauren, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Want to help me spread more pleasure in the world? Please subscribe, rate, and review this episode and share it with a friend. These conversations are meant to be shared, and this is how we create ripples of pleasure and connection throughout our communities. Every time you share this podcast, you're helping another woman discover her own pathway to pleasure and power. And don't forget to follow and tag me on Instagram at Gabriella Espinosa. Until next time, remember, your pleasure matters.